There was a country where almost nobody played the game. A country that worshipped baseball. A country that filled stadiums for sumo wrestlers and barely knew the offside rule. A country that had never once qualified for a World Cup in its entire history and showed no sign that it ever would. And one man looked at that country and saw a future football superpower. The man was Pele. The country was Japan. And he was right about all of it. In this video, we tell the story of the most quietly outrageous prediction in football history. The story of how the greatest player who ever lived stood on Japanese soil decades before anyone took the place seriously. We follow that belief through 40 years of mockery, heartbreak, near misses, and one agonizing night that broke a nation's heart. And we end in the present day, at a World Cup happening right now, where Japan has already terrified the Netherlands, and now stand on the edge of a collision with the one team that means more to this story than any other. Pele's Brazil. But to understand why nobody believed him, you have to understand just how far away Japan was from the world of football. Go back to the 1970s. Picture sports in Japan, and football is almost nowhere in the frame. The national obsession was baseball. It had been since before the war. High school baseball tournaments drew enormous crowds and stopped the country in its tracks. Professional baseball stars were household gods, and right alongside it sat sumo, the ancient sport of giants, wrapped in centuries of ritual and national pride. Those were the games that mattered. Those were the games children dreamed about. Football existed, but it lived in the shadows. There was an amateur league, the Japan Soccer League, founded in 1965. It had a brief moment of sunshine when Japan won a bronze medal at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. For a moment, people paid attention. Then the moment passed. Attendances slid. The grounds were poor. The football was slow. The talent drained away to other sports. By the 1980s, the league was dying on its feet, playing in front of a few thousand scattered fans in half-empty stadiums. The national team was worse. Japan had been playing international football for decades and had achieved almost nothing the wider world noticed. They were stuck below 40th in the global rankings. They had never qualified for a World Cup, not once. While Brazil and Italy and Germany collected trophies and wrote history, Japan was an afterthought, a name you penciled into the easy half of a qualifying group, a guaranteed 3 points for anyone who mattered. That was the Japan the world saw. A polite, hard-working, baseball-loving country that simply did not do football. And honestly, why would it? The sport had no roots there. No tradition, no heroes, no reason to believe that would ever change. And then a man in a Brazilian shirt walked onto the pitch and started telling people it would. Pele came to Asia the way he came to everywhere. As an ambassador, as a force of nature. In the 1960s and 70s, he toured the world with Santos, his Brazilian club, playing exhibition matches in countries where football was barely a rumor. He went to Africa, where in Nigeria, they famously paused a civil war just to watch him play. He went to India. He went to China. And he went to Japan. Later, after he signed for the New York Cosmos in 1975 and dragged American soccer into the spotlight by sheer charisma, the Cosmos toured Asia in the off-season too, carrying the gospel of the game across the Pacific. Wherever Pele landed, crowds followed, cameras followed, and something else followed. Belief. Because Pele did not just play in these places and leave. He talked. He preached. He told anyone who would listen that football was not a European sport or a South American sport. It was the world's sport. It belonged everywhere. And it would grow everywhere, given time and given love. In Japan, that message landed on ground that looked completely barren. But Pele did not see barren ground. He saw discipline. He saw a country that did everything with relentless precision and patience. A country that, when it decided to be good at something, became frighteningly good at it. He looked at the work ethic, the organization, the hunger to improve, and he reported back the same thing again and again. Football would take root here, and when it did, it would not stay small. His visits in the 70s came right as the first quiet conversations about a real professional league were beginning. His endorsement gave the sport something it desperately lacked: credibility. When the greatest footballer alive stands in your country and tells the cameras that your nation has a future in his game, people listen, even if they do not believe. And make no mistake, they did not believe. To the football establishment, Pele's warmth toward Japan was charming and meaningless. He was a guest. Guests are gracious. Of course, he praised the hosts. Of course, he flattered the local game. That is what global ambassadors do. They smile, they encourage, they tell every country they visit that greatness is just around the corner. Nobody took it as a literal forecast. Nobody wrote it down as a serious claim about the future of the sport. And the doubters had every reason on their side. Look at the evidence: a national team going nowhere, a domestic league collapsing, a population that cared far more about a home run than a header. There was no academy system worth the name, no pathway, no professional structure, no history of producing players who could compete with the best in the world. To say Japan would one day rival the Giants was not optimism. To serious football people, it sounded like fantasy. So they filed it away under nice things famous people say, and they moved on. And for years, the evidence kept proving the doubters right. Japan kept losing. Japan kept missing out. The predictions sat there, gathering dust, looking more foolish with every passing tournament. But quietly, behind the scenes, Japan had started to listen to a different voice. Their own. In 1992, the Japan Football Association did something that, on paper, looked even more delusional than anything Pele had ever said. They drew up a plan, a formal, written, long-term plan for the future of Japanese football. And it had a final goal printed right there in black and white. Win the World Cup. Not qualify, not compete, win it. The plan gave them a deadline too, the year 2092, a full century into the future. 100 years to go from a country that had never reached a single World Cup to a country lifting the most coveted trophy in all of sport. They called it the 100-year vision. The rest of the football world did not know whether to laugh or look away. It was the kind of ambition that sounds inspiring in a boardroom and absurd everywhere else. A nation that could not beat its Asian neighbors was openly talking about beating Brazil and Germany and Argentina on the biggest stage there is. They had no World Cup pedigree, no global stars, no track record of producing them. And here they were, putting a date on world domination. But here is the thing about that vision. It was not really a prediction. It was a promise. And the Japanese, more than perhaps any nation on Earth, take their promises seriously. The 100-year plan was not a fantasy scribbled on a napkin. It was a strategy. It came with steps. Build a real professional league. Bring in world-class talent to raise the standard. Invest in youth. Send players abroad. Build the stadiums, the academies, the coaching, the entire machine, brick by patient brick, over decades. It was, in its own way, exactly what Pele had seen in them all those years before. The patience, the precision, the willingness to start something they would not finish for 50 years and pursue it anyway. The doubters saw arrogance. What they were actually looking at was a country that had decided calmly and completely to make a wild prediction come true through sheer relentless effort. And the first brick was about to be laid. In 1993, the J.League kicked off, a brand new professional football league, launched with color and noise and a level of marketing Japan had never seen aimed at the sport. The old amateur clubs were reborn as professional outfits with new names, new identities, new fan bases. Stadiums that had echoed emptily for years suddenly filled up. The league understood something crucial. To make people fall in love with football, you first had to make football feel like an event, like a spectacle, like something worth leaving the house for. And to raise the quality fast, Japan did exactly what the plan demanded. It opened the doors and the wallets, and it brought in some of the biggest names in world football to play on Far Eastern shores. The most important of all was another Brazilian. Zico, one of the finest players of his generation, came to Japan and did not just play. He taught. He set standards. He showed young Japanese players what professionalism actually looked like up close, every single day. He joined a club called Kashima Antlers and turned them into a powerhouse almost by force of will, demanding standards that the players had never even imagined before. They came to call him the god of football. Years later, he would return to coach the national team itself. One Brazilian, planting the seeds of a footballing culture in soil where it had never grown before. There is a poetry to that, given who first told Japan it could be done and which country he played for. Others followed Zico in. Dunga came, a World Cup winning captain. Gary Lineker came, one of England's most famous strikers. Star names, mostly in the later stages of their careers, but stars all the same, and every one of them dragged the level of the league up with them. Match after match, training session after training session. Within 3 years, Japan had rocketed from below 40th in the world up toward 21st. Crowds were averaging close to 20,000 a game. And something deeper was shifting too. For the first time, football was pulling young people away from the old giants of Japanese sport. The grip of baseball loosened, just a little. The pull of sumo softened, just a little. Children who would once have dreamed only of home runs were now kicking footballs in the parks, wearing the shirts, picking heroes who played the beautiful game. The barren ground Pele had stood on was, slowly and unmistakably, coming to life. But a league is not a World Cup. And the prediction, the real prediction, was about the World Cup. Before Japan could chase glory, they had to do the one thing they had never managed in their entire footballing history. They had to qualify. And the first time they got truly close, it ended in one of the most painful nights this country has ever known. The year was 1993. Japan, for the very first time, were on the brink. They had a professional league now, professional players, real momentum. And in the final qualifying match for the 1994 World Cup, they had it in their hands. They were winning. They were minutes away from doing what no Japanese team had ever done. Minutes away from the World Cup. They were playing Iraq in Doha. The match has its own name now, a name spoken with a wince by anyone old enough to remember it. The agony of Doha. Japan led. The clock ran down. The entire nation held its breath, ready to explode with joy. And then, in the dying seconds of the game, deep into stoppage time, Iraq scored. A late equalizer, a header that crushed a dream just as it was about to come true. The final whistle did not bring celebration. It brought silence, then tears. Players collapsed on the pitch. A country that had waited its whole footballing life for that single moment had it ripped away with almost the last touch of the match. They had been seconds from the World Cup, and now they were going home with nothing. The dream deferred, the prediction looking, once again, like a cruel joke. A lesser footballing culture might have folded right there, might have decided the whole thing was not meant to be. But Japan did something different. Japan took the agony and used it as fuel. 4 years later, the wound still raw, they went again. And this time, in another tense, nerve-shredding qualifying campaign, they finished the job. Japan reached the 1998 World Cup in France, their first ever. After decades in the wilderness, after the heartbreak of Doha, after generations of being told it would never happen, the Japanese national team finally walked out at a World Cup as one of the 32 best teams on the planet. The fairy tale, though, did not come with a happy first chapter. France was a brutal lesson. Japan lost all 3 of their matches. Beaten by Argentina, beaten by Croatia, beaten by Jamaica. 3 games, 3 defeats, out at the bottom of the group. To anyone watching casually, it looked like confirmation that Japan did not belong at this level. The minnows had shown up, taken their beating, and would now slink back to Asia. But look closer at those 3 defeats and you see something the scoreline hides. Every single loss was by just 1 goal. They lost 1-0, 1-0, and 2-1. They had not been humiliated. They had not been swept aside. They had been edged out narrowly by experienced World Cup nations in their very first attempt at the highest level. They were not far away. They were right on the edge, and anyone who understood football could feel it. This was not the end of something. This was the beginning. From that moment on, Japan stopped being visitors at the World Cup. They became regulars. This is the part of the story that should make the doubters go quiet. Because qualifying once can be luck. Qualifying once can be a flash. What Japan did next was the opposite of a flash. They qualified for the next World Cup. And the next. And the next. They have now reached every single World Cup since 1998. An unbroken streak that, at the tournament happening right now, stretches to 8 in a row. And they did not just show up to make up the numbers. In 2002, co-hosting the tournament on home soil, Japan reached the knockout rounds for the very first time. The whole country turned blue. Stadiums that had once stood empty for amateur football were now packed and roaring for the national team, the Samurai Blue, on the biggest stage on Earth. A generation of children grew up watching their own country compete at a World Cup at home. The dream that Pele had spoken about decades earlier was no longer a distant idea. It was unfolding right in front of them, in their own cities, in their own backyards. They did it again in 2010, all the way around the world in South Africa, where they reached the last 16 and pushed Paraguay to a penalty shootout before going out. And then came 2018 in Russia, and a night that summed up everything about this Japanese story. The agony and the rise tangled together in 90 minutes. Japan, the supposed minnows, were drawn against Belgium in the round of 16. One of the most talented squads in the entire tournament, stacked with global superstars, overwhelming favorites to win. And early in the second half, Japan did the unthinkable. They went 2 goals up, 2-0 against one of the best teams on the planet minutes away from the quarterfinals, a place they had never reached in their history. The whole nation could taste it. And then Belgium woke up. They pulled one back, they pulled level, and with the very last kick of the game, deep into stoppage time, a lightning counterattack ended with the ball in the Japanese net. 3-2, heartbreak. Japanese players fell to the turf in tears, so close to history that they could touch it, only to have it ripped away in the final seconds. It was Doha all over again, in a different decade, on a bigger stage. But once again, Japan did not break. They came back stronger. Round of 16. After round of 16, this footballing nowhere kept turning up among the best teams on earth and refusing to leave quietly. Off the pitch, the machine the 100-year vision had promised was humming. Japanese players were no longer curiosities. They were filling out squads at clubs across Europe. The biggest leagues in the world were full of them. The pathway the country had built from scratch, the academies, the J.League, the move abroad, the constant raising of the bar, was producing players who could compete anywhere. Japan could now field an entire World Cup squad of European-based professionals if it wanted to. That alone would have sounded like science fiction back when Pele first made his case. But the doubters still had one card to play. Fine, they said. Japan qualify. Japan reached the last 16, but they have never actually beaten the true giants of the game when it counts. Talk to me when Japan beats a World Cup winner. In 2022 in Qatar, Japan made them eat those words. Twice. The first victim was Germany, 4-time world champions. One of the most decorated football nations in the history of the sport. In their opening match of the tournament, Germany did exactly what Germany was supposed to do. They dominated. They took the lead from the penalty spot. They camped in the Japanese half and battered away, missing chance after chance, looking every bit the powerhouse against the plucky underdog. And then Japan flipped the entire match on its head in the space of 8 minutes. With 15 minutes left, a substitute named Ritsu Doan smashed home an equalizer from close range. The German machine, so comfortable moments earlier, suddenly looked rattled. And then, 8 minutes after that, Takuma Asano burst clean through the German defense, took the ball down on the right, and absolutely thundered a shot high into the roof of the net. Japan 2, Germany 1. The four-time champions stunned. The Japanese bench erupting. A nation that once filled stadiums only for baseball, beating Germany at a World Cup. The world called it a shock, a fluke, a one-off. And so Japan went and did it again to an even bigger name. Their final group game was against Spain, former world champions. A team built on keeping the ball, on suffocating opponents with possession, on technical perfection. And for long stretches, Spain did exactly that. By the end of the match, Spain had held the ball for an astonishing 82% of the time. Japan had it for just 18%. 18%. That is the lowest share of possession any team has ever had and still won a World Cup match since 1966. Because possession is not the same as winning. Japan barely touched the ball and still beat Spain 2-1, with 2 goals in the space of 3 second-half minutes. They knocked Spain back on their heels, struck twice with ruthless precision, and then defended for their lives. When the whistle blew, Japan had not just qualified for the knockout stage. They had topped a group containing 2 former world champions. And in doing so, they had sent the mighty Germany crashing out of the tournament altogether. Let that settle for a moment. The country that had never qualified for a World Cup, the baseball nation, the footballing afterthought. Pele once stood among and was laughed at for praising, had just beaten Germany and Spain at the same World Cup and finished above both of them. The prediction did not look naive anymore. It looked like prophecy. And Japan was not finished. The wins kept coming, against bigger and bigger names, in games that mattered more and more. A year after the World Cup, they faced Germany again, in a friendly, on German soil, and this time they did not just win, they destroyed them. 4-1. The 4-time world champions, taken apart on their own turf by the team they were once guaranteed to beat. Then came the moment that, for English fans, was almost unthinkable. In March of 2026, just months ago, Japan walked out at Wembley Stadium, the spiritual home of football, to face England. And they won. 1-0. It was the first time in the entire history of the sport that an Asian nation had beaten England. Not in Tokyo, not on neutral ground, at Wembley, in England's own cathedral. The Samurai Blue walked into the home of the game's inventors and walked out with the victory. Which brings us to right now, this very tournament. The 2026 World Cup, unfolding as we speak. Japan arrived as the first team in the world, outside the host nations, to secure their place at this World Cup. They were drawn into a tough group alongside the Netherlands, one of the most dangerous teams in the competition. And Japan did not flinch. They went stride for stride with the Dutch, pushing them all the way, finishing second in the group and marching into the knockout rounds yet again, playing fast, fearless, attacking football that at moments looked like something out of Brazil's own golden age. The plucky underdogs of 1998 are gone. In their place stands a genuine, fully formed force, a team that names a squad of European stars and believes, openly and without embarrassment, that it can win the entire thing. And now, in the knockout rounds, fate has lined up the one opponent that completes this story perfectly. Brazil, Pele's Brazil, the nation whose shirt he wore when he first walked onto Japanese soil and told a baseball country it would one day belong among football's elite. The 5-time world champions. The most successful football nation in history. The team that, for decades, represented everything Japan was not and supposedly never could be. The very symbol of the mountain Pele swore this nation would one day climb. And now Japan stands across the pitch from them, not as tourists, not as make-weights, but as a side the Brazilians have to take deadly seriously. A side that could knock them out. Think about the full circle of it. The man who promised Japan a future in football wore yellow and green. And the team, standing between Japan and a place in the last 8 of the World Cup, wears yellow and green too. Whatever the scoreboard says when that match ends, the meeting itself is the proof. Japan did not just join the party. Japan earned the right to threaten the very best, on the grandest stage, in the most fitting way imaginable. Whatever happens in that match, the result almost does not matter to the larger truth, because the larger truth was settled long ago. Somewhere along the road from Doha to Wembley, from 1-0 losses to beating Germany and Spain in the same week, the question stopped being whether Japan could compete with the best. They simply do. They are one of them now. The footballing nowhere became a footballing power, exactly as one man insisted it would, back when the idea was a punchline. So let us go back one last time to that man standing on Japanese soil all those years ago. To Pele, the greatest of them all, looking at a country that did not play his game and refusing to see a dead end. Everyone in the room knew what football powers looked like, and Japan was not one of them. The rankings said so, the history said so, common sense said so. And Pele, with nothing but instinct and a lifetime of understanding the game, said they were all wrong. He saw the patience. He saw the discipline. He saw a nation that would not just learn football, but master it, the way it had mastered everything else it ever decided to take seriously. He was not making a polite compliment. He was reading the future, and the only thing he got wrong was perhaps how quickly it would arrive. Japan gave themselves 100 years to conquer the world. They might not need anywhere near that long. The doubters are all gone now, the ones who smiled politely and filed his words under flattery. The ones who said a baseball country could never compete. The ones who watched Japan lose all 3 games in France and called it the natural order of things. They have been silenced, one stunning result at a time, by a country that simply refused to accept the limits everyone else placed on it. Pele saw it first. Pele saw it when there was nothing there to see. And Japan, brick by brick, decade by decade, agony by agony, turned his impossible prediction into the plain and simple truth. He was right about Japan. He was right all along. And it only took the rest of the world about 40 years to catch up. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments and beautiful stories of football. Until next time.